Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, I'm so over the moon, like super duper duper excited to be sharing this conversation with my return guest, Linda Ty. So if you haven't listened to the first episode that I had with Linda, I think it was episode 114, called Our Bodies Hold Our Stories. Do yourself a favor. Go listen to that sucker. It is so good. In fact, it was so good that I reached out to Linda and I was telling her how I said, your episode is one of the most downloaded and listened to episodes. And I would love for you to come back. And so my beautiful friend and wicked super duper smarty pants friend, she said yes. And so, Linda is many things. First of all, she's just fucking brilliant. She's brilliant and she's kind and she's smart and she's funny and she's sensitive and she's compassionate and she's down to earth. I mean, she's so many things. I just love her so much as a human being. And she's also a somatic therapist and a trauma therapist. She's a freelance educator. She's a public speaker like me. She's a storyteller. She facilitates groups. She collaborates. She infiltrates. And she's like a cross-pollinator. I love this. She's a community builder. She is certainly an agent of change. And she's a former child refugee. And she's also a happy human being. And she's literally worked with thousands of people from all over the world. And she promotes mindfulness. She helps people recover from trauma. And she helps people to tend to grief as a means of self-care. And this conversation, we talk about so many different things. I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to call this one. And I didn't want to pick a topic or a label or a title that might keep people from otherwise listening. I didn't want, I'm like, how do I take this incredible conversation that we just had and try to succinctly and specifically give it one topic? So I decided not to do that. And I'm just going to call it, trauma therapist, educator, and storyteller, Linda Ty. And hopefully something in that will garner people's attention and curiosity and pull them in and have them listen. It is an incredible conversation. We talk about everything from trauma to belonging to race to representation. New trauma therapies, what she's up to, the things that we've learned. I mean, it is such an incredible landscape that we cover. It's an adventure. It's a journey. So buckle up, and let's take the ride. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you enjoy this episode, listening to it as much as I did having it and creating it. And if Linda touches your heart the way that she touches mine, if she ignites your brain the way that she ignites mine, and follow your curiosity, go follow Linda. You can find her on social media. You can find her on her website, Linda Ty. You can also, she teaches incredible classes. I've been lucky enough to study with her and train with her. And I'm telling you, it is the best, some of the best money you're ever going to spend. And you're going to walk away not only learning so much more about yourself and how to help yourself, but also how to help others and your clients. So you guys, I happily give you, it has been a happy honor to speak with my friend, Linda Ty. Enjoy. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. Look at, I'm a highly excitable person sometimes, but this is extra wicked excited. I cannot even believe my good fortune that I have the fantastic and fabulous and brilliant and wise and a thousand other adjectives, Linda Ty here with me today. So before I run my mouth and talk about you, Linda, I just want to say hi and welcome back to the show.
Hi, Karen. It's so good to be back with you.
So I gotta say, you guys, you heard the intro, you heard me, give you the bio and the whole thing, but there's some things about Linda. So number one, and I think I've told you this before, but I'm going to say it again, is that your episode with me on the podcast has been one of the most beloved episodes. It has been one of the most downloaded, the most commented on. People reach out to me. They always are just like, oh my God. And you have been the most requested bring back guest of my entire 200 plus episodes. I just want you to know that.
I'm really humbled. See, I deflect. I can't take, like, it's really hard for me. Like, I just want to deflect and go, oh, it's because I have a funny accent and how I look doesn't match how I sound. And, it's because Karen brings out the best in me. Like the struggle is real for so many of us.
I remember when I've said that to you before, you said to me, when you pause like that, right? So I just like to let the pause be there because I suffer from the same affliction of receiving. But you said to me that you're trying to, like, I think, and if I misquote you, correct me, please, but you're trying to, in your own mind, catch up to the compliment because you don't either see yourself there yet or whatever, right? It's like taking that moment to go, that's me. I'm like, oh, are they fucking talking about me? Like, they got the right person? Oh, but I will say, no, I mean, because a lot of people don't watch the show. I do have YouTube and some people do watch it. But most people just listen. So yeah, I mean, of course, I've always said to you, your voice, my whole nervous system, just like the vagus nerves, just down regulates as soon as you start talking to me. But so it's the tone of your voice, but I think it's more what's coming through your voice. There is just your energetic imprint, for lack of a better word. It is just so lovely. It's so lovely. And every time I talk to you, I thought, well, not only is it amazing because I get to learn more about you and what you're up to and the work that you're doing and how you're going out into the world and creating, helping people and creating change. But every time I talk to you, I also learn more about myself. And then I also get just residually, just from listening and paying attention, tools to help my own clients. And I must say at least once a day to somebody, look, as my friend Linda Ty says, it's just sip, sip. Like, we don't have to fire hose ourselves here. We're just a little sip, sip. And then the other day I was talking to somebody and I just said, you want to have people around you who delight in you. So I like channel you, like you come into my brain a lot, even though we don't, talk all the time. You are in my sphere of influence quite a bit, young lady.
Oh, I just got a little buzzy buzz. You just call me young.
So I'm just so grateful that you're here because it is always such a gift for me and my listeners because you bring so much. And we were just talking about that, how excited I am because you said you're going to be doing an in-person training and on the West Coast somewhere. And I just thought, holy shit, how lucky are those people to get in a room with you, number one. But what I love about what you're doing. So first of all, tell us a little bit about it, if you don't mind. And then I'll tag on my extra bonus reason of why I'm excited.
So this workshop is based on the work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and Leisha Skye, and it's called Psychodrama Structures. And so what we're doing is we're recreating the tableau of your family of origin, and we're offering you the missing experience of what you didn't get back then.
Oh, I need that workshop, Linda. I need to get on a plane. So say the name one more time. And so basically, is this kind of, in more layman's terms, like going back and trying to, I don't want to say heal, I don't know what the right word is, but address some of those missing pieces from our childhoods or the original family structure, whatever that might have looked like?
Yes, because what happened, like trauma isn't just what happened that shouldn't have happened, it's what didn't happen that should have happened. And so it's the pervasiveness of these missing experiences. So what we actually, in nuts and bolts terms, do in this workshop is we sit in circle, and then you as the protagonist get to sit there. I'm just the director. And then you talk about your life, and I say, Karen, would you like to bring your father into the space, have a look around and ask one of the participants to see if they would be okay with taking on the role of your father? And then you pick someone and that person then says, where would you like to place me? And then you actually get to specifically put them in your, like in your sphere, exactly like seated on a chair above you, facing slightly away, looking down at you. And then all your shit starts to come up, right?
My
And
shit's coming up just imagining it in my head. Like I'm already viscerally feeling what that would be like. And I have to say, I've actually seen this done in a documentary that I watched. And they were sitting outside and kind of like sitting on these stone things. And there's a few women in the circle and they're saying like, pick who your father and your mother was. And I thought, this is fascinating. I can't believe that is this.
Yes. Yes. So then you become a big red hot messy puddle, and we can offer you a support person, so that person gets to hold you, just so that you can feel resourced enough to be able to get to the truth of your inner landscape. Because that's what happens in dysfunctional families, is we hide the truth from ourselves because that's the only survival strategy we have. And so to be able to hear, for your ears to be able to hear the words come out of your mouth about how you feel towards your father, and to be supported in that, and then to be given the opportunity to have an ideal father. So you look around the circle, you pick someone to be an ideal father, and then that person says, Karen, if I were your ideal father back then, you would have been the apple of my eye.
Oh, I mean, I'm already getting emotional. Like I can just, like I said, I can just time travel a moment and like go forward and put myself there. And I'm thinking, who on the planet doesn't need this? Yeah. Like what a powerful like way to also in some ways like reconsolidate memory, right? And viscerally change the body experience.
You get it. Oh my God, you get it. And the thing is as the protagonist, you get to you get to be in charge of whatever you feel is missing for you. And it's not like a one and done deal. You know, you could come back a few months later and say, I want to put my real dad in the space. And now I'd like to give my real dad ideal support people, because my life would have been different if my dad had have had ideal support people back then. And I wouldn't have inhibited who I am and had to be some other way in order to help him not feel so stressed out.
Okay. Worlds are colliding and intersecting right now. So yes. In integrative hypnosis, which is what, one of the things that I do, there's this thing that we're talking about, which is where we kind of go into the imagination and we tap into what we might call our wise advocate, right? You can call it your inner teacher, you can call it whatever you want, your older self, whatever. And one of the things that we do is we ask, what kind of resources would you like to send back if we had this timeline back to this younger version of you? And then the other thing we say, which all the neural networks in my brain are firing right now, is we ask, and what resources would you want to send back to? And whoever the person was, the mom, the dad, the sibling who's also there. And you just see like this softening around, like when you realize like, oh yeah, they didn't have resources either. And that affected me because I had to Cirque du Soleil myself into something in order to eat, whether it's not get hit, not whatever, find love, whatever the thing is. So I'm just getting jazzed that there's many pathways. There's like different ways to do this. Yeah. But your way sounds like I just think having people play those roles, and I can only imagine just the energy and the emotions, because, I write about this in my memoir. There's a line, and I might have mentioned this on the other episode, where I say, in talking about my stepfather, and I said, I didn't want the truthy truth. Like I couldn't handle the truth of whatever that was. So like you said, dysfunctional families, we kind of lie to ourselves and we bury that truth because for a thousand reasons, right? Because it's too painful, or if I say the truth, then I have to accept maybe they don't love me, or fill in the blank. But man, like, I am fascinated by this. And you've done this. Have you done this many times?
Yes. So I've been assisting Bessel van der Kolk and Leisha Sky with their large group, but also their private small group workshops that are entirely focused upon this particular modality. And so it's time for me to now go, you know what, I'm gonna take the work to the next level.
Okay, Linda. Okay, first of all, so those of you who are listening, it's become very huge over the last however many years. The Body Keeps the Score, that book by Bessel van der Kolk, it's what he's most famous for, that particular body of work. And Linda has been working with him for a really long time. But what most excites me, and no offense, Bessel, like he's fantastic, all of it. But just because I personally have gotten to know you, I fucking love that you're now taking it and infusing it with your own particular insights and history and wisdom and flavor. And remember, I've said to you in the past, like, I suspect that you're a poet. So your own poetry and your own storytelling, like, West Coast people. Is it open to the public, or is it only for like therapists and stuff like that?
No, it's one of those invitation only events. But I tell you what, if you send an email to my assistant Tyler at assistant@linda-ty.com, we can put you on a wait list. Yeah, for the next time I'm on the East Coast or the West Coast.
Oh my God. So if you come to the East Coast, like, I am there, first of all, but I just love that and it's not, I hope I'm saying this the right way, that you're getting the opportunity, like you said, to expand on this work and to elevate this work and to bring your own particular thing to it, because you're unlike anybody I've ever met. I mean, and I'm going to wait like deer in the headlights, like that, like, you are unlike anybody I've ever met before. And there is, it gives my heart great joy to see people that I adore and delight in going out into the world and getting to spread their wings and leave their mark. And just, it's like sprinkling, you might not see in this way, but it's like a little bit of sprinkling fairy dust. I get so happy that people are going to get to experience you and your work. It's brilliant.
I'm excited too, because like I love Bessel and I love Leisha, but Bessel's like a white man in his 80s. He's a psychiatrist. And so he's had the life experiences that he's had in his training. And then I come into the work where I'm like, hang on, there are aspects of the refugee experience, of the immigrant experience, of the people who come from collectivist cultures.
Yes.
And psychotherapy does tend to hyperemphasize the dyadic relationship between the parent and the child, typically the mother and the baby. And yet secure attachment is about so much more than that, right? It's secure attachment with nature and with land and the seasons and where your food comes from and your pets, right? And it's secure attachment with ancestors, not just bloodline ancestors, but professional ancestors, spiritual ancestors, the teachers of your teachers, your
lineage, all of it.
Yes. And it's secure attachment with your culture and languages and songs and song lines that have gotten broken and storylines that have gotten disrupted, and reclaiming that and the rituals that help us move through the transitions in life that we've become bereft of. And secure attachment to our bodies and to each other's bodies, and secure attachment to pleasure and to rest and to sleep and to time. And that is a larger context. And we forget that there's a larger context to so much for women, for bodies of color, for disabled bodies, for neurodivergent bodies, and to be able to organically, in reciprocity, and in a mutually empowering way, invite someone's experiences to actually shape how therapeutic containers, groups, relationships, modalities are actually done. Yeah, that is actually the work of dignity and of justice.
Oh,
and in therapy, we tend to reduce all of this to belonging. Yeah, not that, sorry, I said that with a snarky tone of voice. Belonging's a big deal.
I like your snarky tone. All parts of you are welcome here, Linda. All parts of you are welcome. But that's what I'm saying. Like, so I'm so excited that you brought up land, because that was one of the things I wanted to touch upon. And you just said so much in that. And I try to be so present when you're talking, and my brain is like, oh, I want to say something about that. And then I want to say something about this. But if you feel comfortable, can you just share with people about where you live, like describe the home in which you live and kind of how you live? Because from what I've gleaned from what you've kind of shared publicly and stuff, returning to the land in the way that you have has been incredibly healing for you. And since you brought it up in that larger answer you just gave me, I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I live out in the woods on a dead end dirt road, but you live in the wilderness. So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, I just saw your video of that moose eating your dried plants from and your dog gave, Buttons was like, woof, and you're like, steady. And I'm like, oh my God, that fucking moose is like right there. And I'm thinking Linda's trekking through the snow to get to her car to do these things. And I'm just fascinated. So can you share a little bit about how where you live and how you live has helped or changed you or affected you?
Oh, sure. So I'll give listeners a bigger frame.
Yes.
I always believed that how you live is so much more important than what you do. And yet, being raised in Australia in the 80s and the 90s, everything is about what are you going to do with your life? And I needed to bust out of that to be in an environment that supported my wanderings and meanderings and figuring it out of how do I live? How does one live? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a human animal spirit? And so discovering Alaska meant that I could actually figure that out. And so I live on 5 acres. The 160 acres behind us is vacant. The block of land is just outside of city limits, so there's no building permits, planning permits, submissions, approvals, or any of that. If you reckon that you can build something yourself, off you go and do it, and there's no one here to tell you otherwise. And if you don't know how to do it, you throw your mate a 6-pack of beer and he comes over and he talks you through how to do it and he watches you do it while you do all the work, right? And it's so liberating. It's empowering. And when people ask me, how did give me the secret tip of your healing journey? I'm like, I got off the wheel of fucking toxic capitalism. Right? And it was 2006. We bought 5 acres of land for less than $11,000.
And this is you and your sweetie, I assume.
He's my sweetie.
Yes.
Yes. And then we did some dirt work. We bought the raw materials ourselves. We built a log cabin. So for less than $25,000, we're technically retired because we own where we live. And we have now agency over our time and our bodies.
Oh my gosh, Linda, that is such a powerful, powerful story. And I can imagine what you're describing. It's so interesting, right? Because I think so many of us, I call it the zigzag path, what you just described, which is, so I don't know if you know anything about human design. So there's
I've heard of it, but no, not
so think it's a combination of a lot of things, but think astrology meets this. And so there's these different types of designs. And so I'm a generator, which means I kind of generate my own energy, and what generates my energy is what lights me up and brings me joy. So when I'm in with people and places or programs or creative stuff that lights me up, I spread that energy and joy with, you know, it goes out, right? So when I'm lit up, you usually can tell, right? So, but one of the elements of this is they talk about, and we don't need to really go into it other than to know that I'm the kind of person that has to learn through experience. I have to go and find out if something is or isn't for me. And in this world, that can be, and I'm not a flaky person at all, but I would go and try something and I'd be excited about it. And then I'd learn, ooh, that's not for me. And then I'd go over there and I tried something. I go, ooh, that's not for me, or that place or that relationship. And sometimes that can be seen as like what you're saying, I needed to meander. I needed to wander. I needed to try things, fuck up, fall down, get up, get lit up. Like that's what I needed too. And when you're coming out of like college or school or whatever, and it's just like, what are you going to do for work? What are you going to do for a job? How are you going to pay back your student loans? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do it's just like, oh my God, there's no room to discover what you really love, who you really are, like what you're here to do, like what's, like you said, that animal's body, spirit, everything. And I've never fit into the container. Like it's never worked for me. But the rest of the world will shine a light and say, well, like, what the fuck are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just trying to do me. I don't know what you guys are doing, but I'm just trying to do me. So I love, love, love that you just said it, because I think if somebody's listening to this right now, I can't tell you how many nervous systems just did like what I call little double amen hands, like, oh, like that's allowed? Like that's allowed?
Yeah, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like within reason, and not being like reckless. It's not like a, you know, go be reckless, but it's like go do stuff.
Oh my gosh, Linda, that's so fantastic. And so now you guys have this cab, right? No running water. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So no running water, electricity?
Yes, we do have electricity. We had an outhouse for about 10 years, but now we have an indoor composting toilet.
Fantastic. And
Yes.
you heat by like wood, fire?
Yes.
Like, wow.
Yep. So there's a wood fire. We do have backup heat that uses diesel fuel, but we mostly heat using firewood. And so we go and cut that firewood ourselves and split it and stack it and let it dry out. And it just becomes how you live.
But it sounds like a season, like your life must be with the seasons of all of it. And whether that's food, nature, like literally the sun, the wind, the rains, the snow, all of it. Like, do you feel more deeply in tune with the world around you now?
With the earth, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's time to go cut firewood. There's time to go fishing. Like there's time to go. And it's not like making the time to go. It's like the fish are running now. So this is the time to go fishing. Yeah. Like we need to go cut firewood before the spring, because when spring comes, the root systems then draw water up into the wood, into the trees, and then the trees become heavier and have a bigger moisture content. So you need to go cut your firewood after the fall, but before the spring.
For the spring.
Yes.
Fascinating. Hold on. So one of the other things I was just thinking about is I'm thinking about, so it reminds me a little bit of macrobiotics. Do you know about macrobiotics at all? So macrobiotics is a way, it was created by, I want to say Michio, I'm trying to think of his name. But so I ate macrobiotically for 2 years. So I've been vegan for a really long time. But what the extra piece was is that he really taught that the way of health was eating in season. So if you live in the Northeast, like, why are you eating bananas and pineapple in December or January or whatever? And so he would say that the foods, you know, if you imagine them on this spectrum, and right in the center is where the root vegetables and the leafy greens and the grains are. And like over here is the very yang, like meats and salt and whatever. And over here is the really yin, like sugar and sweets and ice cream. And you try to kind of seasonally like follow, you know, but we have grocery stores. So now you have access. So we're so removed from the natural tendencies that it sounds like you're tapping back into with being on the land and being in relation to the earth and the way that you are. And I think the other piece that really caught my ear was when you said we're kind of like semi-retired, which points to something I read on your website, and I brought it up before, but I think I'm just going to look for it really quickly because I thought it was really really fantastic, where you said well, I'm going to read this, but this is what I was looking for. You said we grow vegetables, we pick wild berries, we raise animals, fish and hunt, and preserve the harvest. Shifting out of an extractive economic and philosophical relationship with the natural world opened me up to living and operating in mutuality with all forms of life, including myself. That's what I'm saying. Like you just have a way with the words, Linda. But the other thing I really wanted to point to is because you're kind of off of this capitalistic kind of grind, it allows you to price your offers and to do things in such a way that opens it up to more people. Is that one of the intentions, right? To give more people. Go ahead.
It's one of the byproducts, because living in this way, I actually got to have the experience that you can't eat money. I got to have the experience of that. It's not an intellectual thing. And I get, for many of us, it's, we only have the capacity for the intellectual, to go, yeah, I get that we can't eat money, but I actually get that. Yeah. And when COVID hit, between my husband and I, we had $300 in the bank, and we had a big sack of rice, a big sack of flour, and 2 chest freezers full of caribou and moose and salmon and, frozen vegetables from our garden. And we had a bunch of seeds, and we also had, food that we'd pickled and jarred, inside the home. And we had a big shed full of firewood, and we felt good. Yeah, we actually felt good. And that was when it really hit home for me that what you have is community, and you can't eat money. And thinking about all the ways in which trauma as well as toxic capitalism has caused for me to have a transactional relationship with myself and my life and other people. Do I like this? Do I not like that? What do I have that you want? What do you have that I want? Yeah, that's that. Yeah. It's transactional, but it's also extractivist. And living closely in relationship to the land in Alaska has caused me to shift away from that in such a way that my value system got shifted.
Wow.
Yeah. And I stand on the shoulders of giants, meaning those who have sacrificed before me. And we have a responsibility to each other. And if I have more than you have, then I have a responsibility to share that.
I just want that to land for a moment, because and this is one of the reasons why I love talking to you. I'm doing a podcast episode, maybe even after we're done talking, at like a solo show, and I'm calling it borrowing other people's brains. And it's kind of the essence of it is talking about how lucky I feel when I get to study with other people, and when I get to learn from other people, or when I have a friend who thinks slightly differently than me, like enough that she could get me and understand it, but look at something like just a slightly different perspective. And every time I talk to you, I feel like my brain is growing. But I also think that you just say these things in this particular way where I feel like, oh, for this hour or so, like I get to borrow Linda's brain and see from a whole new point of view that's really unique and different. And it's a beautiful gift. Like you even just coming on the show and sharing these stories and sharing your perspectives, and I don't know anybody else that lives in Alaska the way that you do, right? It is such an opportunity for myself and my listeners. So I have great gratitude that I kind of get to be exposed through the lens through which you look, because there's always a moment where I just stop and it's something just like hits me in such a way. And I think people like to talk a good fucking game around community and like what that means. But when you just said that, if I have more than you, I'm paraphrasing, right? Then there is a responsibility and an opportunity to share and to give. I mean, isn't that what it's all about?
Yes. And this is part of that secure attachment relationship to time. That the reciprocity between us means that you pay it forward or you pay it on, or but there isn't a transactional nature to this.
The tit for tat, like now you owe me something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it then becomes a curious inquiry, because I actually believe that this is our essential nature. What is it that gets in the way? And I feel ever so grateful for life in Alaska, because it is hard.
Sure.
And yet there's discomfort that grows you, and there's discomfort that makes your world smaller. And discernment is being able to step into discomfort and to actually really feel like, is this growing me or making my world smaller? Because we can actually choose discomfort in a way that makes our world bigger. And that's part of that meandering and that wandering and that fucking up and eating the humble pie, right?
Yes. 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 It's so fantastic to like I'm doing this thing, like I'm totally up here, like right now I'm trying to come back into my body, because when I talk to you, it's like it just expands like so many things. But I don't even know if people know. I know some people know, but I don't think most people know how to do relationship that is not transactional, that is not full of expectations that are ultimately leading to disappointments, right? It's like I also believe it is our true nature to share. Like even just like last night, I had some extra, we hand cut some potatoes, and we made like, homemade French fries, whatever. I could eat white potatoes all day long. Anyways, so I had some extra in my bowl. And so I kept taking, like, from my pie, my sweetie finished his. And so I kept handing him his, and he's like, those are for you. And I said, I don't know, they just taste better when I share my snacks with you. And I love sharing my snacks. I do. I'm like, I like sharing my snacks, and I'll always be like, do you want a bite? Like I'm always saying to people, you want some? Right? If I pull out a piece of gum, I'm not trying to make myself quote unquote good or get a gold star. It's just for me personally, there's something joyous. And maybe it's because I felt so fucking alone as a kid. Like maybe I spent so much time just feeling so alone that getting to, oh, it's making me emotional, that getting to share something with somebody, it just feels really nice. And here's the other thing, being a poor kid growing up, like having something to share that I have an abundance of, that I can share it, like that's a big deal.
And we're all abundant in so many ways. We just don't feel it or realize it or experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as you're sharing, Karen, what emerges for me that I feel in this moment is at the core of a lot of this is psychological homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Which points back to that, like that workshop that you're doing.
Yes.
Is having a bed to sleep in and four walls or whatever doesn't mean that you feel like you're home.
Correct. And that psychological homelessness, that, you know, when we psychologically at home, I know that I belong to people who belong to people who belong to people. Right?
Yes.
Concentric circles outwards, as well as through time backwards, as well as through times forward, as well as laterally in the present moment. I belong to people who belong to people who belong to people.
It's so powerful. Do you ever work with children of who have been adopted who bump up against what you're talking about?
Yes.
I mean, no, I know there's so many communities culturally
Mhm.
that probably also feel this way. And this is what I'm saying when I say whenever I talk to you, I learn so much about myself. It's like you say these things and I think, oh, that explains so much about what I think and feel sometimes, or what I have felt and thought and couldn't give words to, because I'm not hashtag, a psychologist. I mean, I'm a lot of things, but I'm still learning. I'm always, wanting to learn to understand more. But yeah, like what you just said, like I'm gonna not have to, I'm going to marinate in that and think about the ways that has shown up in me and may still be showing up in me. And I think it's also one of the reasons why I am a spiritual mentor, why I am so drawn to, like, it's interesting when I've had readings with intuitives or people, they'll often say to me, you have like this big guy who stands behind you. And I always say, oh, that's grandfather. I just have a sense that there's something there. And one time I had I've done multiple ceremonies. My friend who has, I don't know, relationships with shamans from Ecuador, and they would come to New Hampshire and they would do these ceremonies. And one time, they're like blowing fire at you and rubbing eggs on you and doing the whole thing. It's like incredible to learn these other rituals and be a part of it. And at one point, one of them said to me, you have so many different like lineages around you. And I just thought, and as a kid who, again, felt so alone in the world, to just know that so much of my connection was to things unseen. And I think that's why being a spiritual mentor has been so healing for me as well, because where people have been like, to me, fucking sketchy or untrustworthy or suspicious, I don't feel that way around my ancestors and my helpers, divine helpers, whoever they might be. It's why animals have always been so like, like all day long, right? So when you're talking about this, I just think like, Linda, you just peel back another layer for me. And so thank you for the gift of you. Thank you for sharing that, because that psychological homelessness, that is like, that's a big one. I know I'm not the only one who resonated with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the purpose of therapy or healing or, coming home to you, it's coming home to yourself, right?
Sure.
And what happens when there's psychological homelessness is that I walk through the world feeling that other people don't get me.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
then, so I have that wounding there. So I want other people desperately to get me. But as soon as there's the whiff of the sniff of you don't get me, then boom, I'm in my
Lockdown.
lockdown. I'm in my terminal uniqueness.
My special suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I go see a therapist, right? And I can tell when you want me so desperately to get you, and yet the role of therapy and therapists and healers and guides is to create a space where you get you, so
Yes.
that you can let the world off the hook from needing to get you.
Yes. And how much more freedom is that to live that way?
Yes.
Where I don't need you to understand my experience or where I'm coming from or whatever, because I have me, I can self-resource, right? I can self-regulate, I can self-soothe, and I can find agency and home. And that is so much of the work that I do, is this coming. I'm really great at creating a sense, I think, of belonging for other people. It is the ongoing journey for me to continue to create that for myself.
And the juxtaposition is that we actually do need it from the people around us and the communities around us. But when I have it in here, I'm then more discerning at being able to create or step into those supportive communities. Yeah, and then that's where dignity then arises, because it's about more than belonging.
All right, take that a step further or deeper for us.
Sure. You know, we're looking for somewhere where we can belong and be ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yet, and this conversation arises for me particularly with white-bodied folks, where when we start to talk about racism, and this is like 20 years of conversations, the first thing a white person says is, I get what it's like not to belong and not to fit in. So they default to their subjugated selves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we're playing like the oppression Olympics or something.
Yes.
And it's taken me a long time to actually be able to find the words to say racism isn't about belonging or not fitting in. It's about safety and dignity and justice. And I feel that if, you know, white-bodied folks could take this to their own containers and communities to reshape the languaging, that it's actually about more than just belonging. When you see yourself reflected and mirrored and held and gotten, then you actually feel dignity in your body.
Yeah. That just landed. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think so much of what white people often do, being one, I feel like I can talk about it, is that this desire to try and, like, what's the word I'm looking for? To kind of say like, oh, I get that. It's like, when they say, well, I grew up poor too, or they're trying to find a way to like kind of match or mirror or make that connection, rather than kind of stepping back and saying like exactly what you're saying. Because as a white person, as soon as you say that, you're signaling to the other person that you actually don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, there is no dignity to that person's experience. Am I saying that?
Yeah. Well, not, you're not, it's not about, it's not an indicator of, it's an indicator that you've gone into defensiveness.
Yes.
Yeah, that when you say, yeah, I get what it's like to be poor too, like that, you've actually gone into psychological defensiveness. Yeah. Even though what you're trying to say is, I get it. It's like, but you saying that you get it is actually stopping the conversation from actually happening around dignity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, how do I say this? I don't think that people even have a clue that they're doing it.
No, we don't. We don't. Look, I'm going to give you a list of 7 things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to sit with these 7 things. Internalized devaluation.
Mm.
An assaulted sense of self. Learned voicelessness.
Mm.
Psychological homelessness. Complex and ambiguous grief and loss. Survival orientation. And rage.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I saw that list, I thought, oh, that's complex developmental trauma. Yeah. And then I listened to the rest of it. And it's the work of Dr. Ken Hardy, who's a Black psychologist, who says these are the invisible wounds of racial trauma. And that's when I took that big, deep breath in and I went, oh my God, the last 15 years of my life, I've been learning about complex developmental trauma. And it's written by white people, about white people, for white people. And no one talks about race. And here I am trying to look for the trauma history that actually isn't there for me, other than the refugee trauma. I simply had, my parents were neglectful because they were physically and emotionally unavailable, but it wasn't like abject neglect. It was this unavailability. So I'm looking for a trauma history, and I discovered the refugee trauma. However, everything about my symptoms and experiences of mental illness and addiction was actually about racial oppression. And I didn't know that until Dr. Ken Hardy came out and gave this list that made me go, whoa, like this is where we miss each other.
Yeah.
This is where I then go and see a therapist and I have social anxiety, I'm depressed, I can't figure my shit out. And they say, what's your relationship with your parents like? Yeah. And so instead of saying, hey, you inhabit a marginalized, an identity that's marginalized by society.
Yeah.
And I see my trans and non-binary and queer clients, my neurodivergent clients, my disabled clients, that you can have the most jamming parents in the world and you can still have all of those, you know, the things that I just described there. And you could also have okay parents. However, because of the training that we have that hyper focuses on trauma and attachment,
So much gets missed.
So much gets missed in terms of the larger context of things. And then we try and come together to have conversations about this. And then it goes pear-shaped.
Well, because it's almost like you think you're speaking the same language, but you're not. Because it's like, all right, so here's a really tough question. And it's not about marginalized people or people of color educating the white people or whatever. So if we're trying to more deeply understand one another, right? To create experiences and communities and events, whatever, to places where we gather, where it feels like there's space for all the different experiences and all the voices and all the things. But like I call this thing a pen and somebody else calls it a maca and it's like close, but not really, whatever. What have you found besides obviously asking questions, listening, not making assumptions, not putting your shit on other people, whatever? What am I trying to say? How do we better come to a place where maybe we understand each other or create that space for each other, or not just pour our I don't know how to say it, our selfness, like on each other. Am I making sense what I'm trying to say?
Yes. I need to do my own work around my subjugated self, so that when I'm with you and we talk about things that are hard, I don't default to my subjugated self. Yeah, I don't default to my own experiences of victimhood.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean by subjugated selves. Yeah.
Yes.
So what that's where it all goes pear-shaped. So that's where my own individual work of recognizing, oh shit, I just slipstream so quickly, into my subjugated self. Because that first piece, that internalized devaluation and the assaulted sense of self, that is the core wounding of complex developmental trauma survivors. We go there so quickly. And yet that's where we can actually form a sense of, I'm on your side, like I want to make the world a better place.
Yes.
And yet when we start to have these conversations, I just go into subjugated self. And I needed to do my own healing work around that before I could then turn up for trans bodies and for non-binary bodies and for homosexual bodies and for disabled bodies and for other bodies of color, as well as for female bodies.
Sure.
Yeah. And female white bodies. Yeah. Yeah. So that I can hear what you're saying without me defaulting to my subjugated self as well.
And Linda, though, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a world where a lot of people, more people now, are doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
But we also live in a world where a shit ton of people are not, I'm not going to say they're not interested in doing it, but it's not even on their radar. And it sometimes feels like it's just like people are just walking around bumping into each other with their shit and like, get over it, suck it up. You're so sensitive. You're this, you're that, like whatever. Do you hold on to hope? Do you hold on to, do you think it's just like up to each individual to just do their own work in their own sphere of influence? Or do you ever look at like the pear-shaped world and go, we're fucked? Like we are all not talking the same language. Like we're doomed, you know? Like what do you think about it? I mean, because you're so, I think, connected with communities that are so smart. Like seriously, like you're really smart. And so you talk in these languages and you've been steeped in your own personal work, but also educating yourself, learning, teaching, again, fucking up, going, oops, like, oh, better way to do this, expanding, whatever. So like, is there hope for us, do you think? Is a world and a culture with getting better at creating more safety for each other and more, where we're not just harming each other with our ignorance?
I think we'll always continue to do that. And I'm talking like me as an individual, as well as, you know, at group levels. And the ability to acknowledge that and repair and to continue moving forward, right?
Sure.
And that's where my own lived experience as someone who's in two worlds, as I'm a code switcher, I'm a bridge. I need to be able to talk in 6th grade level English. And I also need to be able to talk to people who will judge me for that. And I need to use the big fancy words. And I believe that we're actually all bridges, as in,
yes,
we're always creating shadow. And your ability to integrate your shadow allows you to then be able to speak into people who are still living in the shadow that you used to inhabit.
Oh, Linda.
And if you have plenty, you have a responsibility to share.
Yeah. It's so powerful. Nobody's ever said it that way before. Like, I would say it like this: we're all creating and casting shadows. Like that is such a, that imagery is, I'm telling you, you're a poet. That imagery is so powerful. And I think that we do kind of walk around with a certain sense of, I don't know if people, and myself included, obviously, I am not free of this, understanding the wake that we kind of leave behind us, you know, with our words. And, you know, you see it so much in the coaching field, you know, that I'm in, the mentoring and coaching field, where, you know, I've stopped saying, well, this is going to be a safe place. This is a safe place. I've created a safe place. And I said, well, I can't determine that. I can try to, that is my hope, right? That is my hope. But I can't determine for other people what is or isn't safe. But I think that there's a lot of words and language and ways that people think that, oh, this is how we talk about this or do this. And a lot of times they're causing, and again, I'm not saying they're being malicious or any of us is trying to do it on purpose, but there is a lot of education and lived experience. And it's one of the things I think that happens when you don't go outside your community. Like if you don't interact with people who look different than you and sound different than you, or live different than you, or whatever, I think your world, like you used in a different example, becomes very small. And I was talking about this the other day. Do you know the story of Tyree Nichols and what happened, this young man? Okay. So, you know, I wrote something about it, and I was making the comment of how, like, oh, I can share a picture of my, of my puppy or my cat and get like 150 likes and 75 comments and whatever. And then I share a picture of my sweetie at his gig playing his guitar and singing, and immediately like 30, 40 people like it, comment, blah, blah, blah. My post on Tyree, like maybe 7 or 8 people responded to it, but only my best friend like commented, because she's like, I see your heart in this and I see your soul in this, and I'm so glad you said something. And one of the things I was saying to my sweetie is, I'm often the one in my spheres that will bring up those kinds of conversations. I'm not saying I always do it the best or say the right words. And I'm getting emotional because it's really frustrating for me that those things that I really care about, that I think we need to talk about, whether people are just too afraid to say the wrong thing, or like, I'm like, there's no way you could miss that post, because I sandwiched it right in between 2 other really popular things. And I thought, man, what is happening? And it wasn't about, I didn't need the fucking likes. It wasn't about me. It was like, I was trying to say, this is important to me. This is important to all of us. These are things that we need to be talking about. We can't turn a blind eye to this stuff. And we all have our own part to do. And yeah, it is what it is. I get a little disappointed sometimes. I get a little frustrated sometimes, because I want to have these larger conversations. And so oftentimes I'll invite, you know, people onto the podcast to talk about race, or to talk about this, or to talk about that. But I sometimes sense like a deep unwillingness, and I don't know if it's fear or guilt or shame or awkwardness or afraid to step in it or get canceled or whatever the thing is. But could be, I mean, I don't even know why I'm talking, but other than to say that just bummed me out. That I was trying to create an opportunity to, because you don't need, you know, you don't need to be a person of color to have empathy or to speak upon this isn't right or whatever, you know. And I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are. Yeah, that might be a worthwhile Facebook post in and of itself. Like, hey, I've noticed that when I make posts about blah, you know, and to ask people why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's good. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, because you know, look, I have been ignorant, arrogant, condescending, judgmental, in denial, in avoidance in my own lifetime about a shit ton of things. Yeah.
Me too.
And yeah, and that learned voicelessness is a survival strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when I wanted to have a voice and I'm not given the microphone, or the microphone gets taken away from me.
Mm.
And when it comes to topics like race, people then, that their subjugated self, you know, starts to emerge, and that learned voicelessness can take over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's that the spiraling of internalized evaluation and an assaulted sense of self, and who would want to hear what I have to say anyway? And I really want to say it, but if I say it, it's going to expose me, and exposure equals death. And it's going to take so much energy to actually go out and say something that I'm trying to take care of my own energy by not.
Yeah.
And so it actually,
I appreciate your point of view and your perspective.
Yeah. And I'm not making excuses for anyone, right? Because an explanation isn't an excuse. It's simply an explanation. But what you choose to do next, that's where the spiritual practice is. That's where the personal growth practice is. Yeah.
And I get it on so many levels. I think that it's one of the reasons why I love talking to you. It's what I said at the very beginning, is because giving me insight into it, and that line, which I've always said, just because I understand it, I can understand why you might not want to, and it's not an excuse, right? It's like, I can understand it. I can have compassion, because I do understand that fear of, like, in some cases, to be seen equals harm, right? Something dangerous could happen to me. And we know we live in a culture now where people are just waiting to cancel you or say whatever, attack you. And social media does not, for a shit ton of people and reasons, feel like a safe place. It is, though, one of the ways that we all kind of communicate what's up, what's going on, what's arising. And like, to kind of segue into, so let me just say thank you for that. I always appreciate your perspective. You helped me to grow as a teacher and as a mentor as well. And I think sometimes, like, the considerations, right? So let me give you an example. So we're talking about social media. And if you don't want to talk about this, you can say we're not talking about this. But something I had never even considered, and this is what I'm saying, the considerations that all kinds of people are having all kinds of different experiences than the subjugate itself is, right? Like, so when you did that post about your once in a decade haircut, I happened to see it on Facebook, and it looks, you got your hair's up, so I haven't seen it. You got it cut?
I got it cut. I made it.
Okay. But this is what I'm saying, though, why it's so fascinating. As you're going down the list of why going into a salon, and like everything from, right, like all the noises and the plastic thing being wrapped around you and your arms being covered so you can't, like, and I'm just thinking, holy shit. One of my closest friends is like an incredible hairstylist. And I'm thinking to myself, I bet there has been zero, I shouldn't say zero, very, very minute, little, if any at all, in the hair industry about that. Right. And so I'm thinking, holy shit, here's Linda once again, broadening my perspective and thinking like, and this is what I'm saying, if there's all these considerations, and I sometimes wonder if people get paralyzed, like, I know I'm not doing a good, I'm like, please give me the words. What I'm trying to say is, like, that never would have even occurred to so many people, that act where you feel like you're going in to be made to feel more beautiful or get pampered or self-cared can feel like an act of terror. Like, it can feel like, oh my fucking God. And what's another interesting thing is I'm fascinated by a couple of accounts on Instagram. And I also think it's fascinating that they're women of color who are like Barbies for little kids who are neurodivergent, and they've created systems to like get a snip in, and then they do something fun, or get a snip in and count to 5. And like, and I just think, who are these angels walking among us? Who are these brilliant, intuitive people who are serving the underserved, the misunderstood, the, you know, whatever? I just think that so many people wouldn't even think to think that. And when you broke it down for me, it's like, oh my God, of course. why haven't, I thought of that before? You know why? Because that's not an experience that's challenging for me. And we get so locked in our own fucking bubbles of self that we sometimes lose sight of, hey, there's a lot of violence against Asians happening right now, or hey, there's a lot of this going on in the world right now. And we just kind of get locked in to this little tiny point of view. So I'm so grateful. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about that post if you feel comfortable, because it totally stopped me in my tracks and made me go like, here's Linda once again, being her naturally brilliant self, teaching me something just by telling a story. That was a lot. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's let me see here. The being able to share differences and not get blown up by the fact that someone else experiences the world differently to you, like like that's what is at the core of all of this, right? And social media, in a way, I don't know, it can be very harmful, and it can also be a great way to share
Yes.
our own unique ways of experiencing the world. And for me, like hairdresser, forget it. Like I realized at one, like I still don't have, I've been living in the US for 15 years. I still don't have a primary care provider because I'm still in grief over the person that I saw in Australia who saw my entire family for 30 years. Right. And because I know the systems don't work that way here. And like I had a hairdresser in Australia and I couldn't handle any of the hairdressing stuff, but it was the same person. Right. It was the same assault to the senses in the same order every time. So at least the abuse.
It was predictable. Was predictable. Yes. I know what abuse is coming next.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And so when I came to Alaska, I was like, I don't need to groom here. Yeah. But then
Okay,
after
wait, that is such a great line. I don't need to groom here.
I don't need to groom here. People don't care how you look. Yeah. And I know it's so liberating.
Yes.
And so then I started cutting my own hair and I realized I don't know, I started to reclaim more and more of what felt good and what didn't feel good for me. And then I learned about trauma-informed yoga, and then I learned about all the ways in which I, as a trauma survivor, struggle with the world. And I didn't realize I had those struggles until someone said, hey, trauma-informed yoga classes. Like there's no street front where people can see you, and there's no mirrors where you can see yourself. And there's, the instructor isn't walking around the room outside of your field of vision. And I'm like, oh my God, this is why I learn about yoga and then I do it at home. And then I started to recognize that trauma-informed care is a philosophy that weaves its way through everything. Yeah. Yeah. And so you go to the hairdresser and you walk in there and there's way too much shit going on. Right. There's
music. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, there's at least 5 people or 10 people in the room and they're all doing something different. Right. That in and of itself. And then there's music, and then there's the chemical assault, and then there's like the layout of the salon, and there's usually only one exit and one entrance.
You are so correct. You are so correct. Yes.
Yeah. And there's always like the waiting room area between me and the exit. So I gotta right. It's all these barriers to my escape. And then on top of that, you get sat in a chair, and typically it's a high chair, but these days there are lower chairs, but I'm not in charge of how it swivels or how it goes up and down. And someone's moving me around, and then like their breasts are in my freaking face, and they've got perfume and deodorant, and then I turn around this way and their breasts are back in my face again. And then I'm trying not to look at myself in the mirror, and then I'm trying not to look at the people who are walking past who are looking at me, but they're not actually looking at me. And then I go over to the hair thing, and then my neck goes back like this, right, while my arms are underneath this cape, and I am entirely defenseless while my throat is elongated and exposed. And then you're doing this thing to my hair and you're asking me if it feels good. And I'm like, yeah. I'll take anything to make it be over.
To hurry up.
Because I'm feeling so vulnerable, exposed. And then we go back to the chair, and then there's like the scissors, the sound of the scissors, like right here. Yeah. And so I've been tuning out everything because there's blow dryers and music, but now I'm like having to tune in to the sound of the scissors. Right. And then you're trying to make pleasant conversation with me, and then boom, your buzzies are in my face again.
Make it stop. Make it stop.
Yeah.
And then we're told, go to the salon because it's going to be so soothing.
Yeah.
Give yourself a little treat. But
Yeah.
it is. Go ahead. I don't want to go ahead. It's so fantastic. I'm laughing because you're such a fantastic storyteller. Like I'm just there on the journey. But I had never thought about. I have never. You know what's so fascinating? In my hair salon where I go, it's again one of my best friends' salon. She does my stuff. Whenever they take me back to the chair where they put you back to wash your hair, you can stretch out your legs. Like you can do like a lazy boy, like, and it comes out. And they always say to me, do you want your feet up? And I have never until this moment thought of this. They say to me, do you want your feet up? And I always say no. And because I'm flexible, right? I've been doing yoga a gazillion years. I always put my feet on the same seat where my ass is, and my knees end up pulled up close into my body almost. I'm not like, in wind relieving pose or whatever, but I am tucking myself in, and I almost always go like this and drop my chin. And it's never occurred to me before till you just described it. I'm like, oh, some part of me recognizes how vulnerable physically I am right here. So I make myself small, like I contract, I make myself smaller, and so isn't it amazing how the body, I mean, because but isn't it so amazing how the body goes like, oh, no. Like I'm going to play the game, but I'm going to try to find a way to regulate while I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never even made the connection until just now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I used to
And I don't let them ever take my jacket either. I'm so sorry. That's another thing. They'll say, can I take that from you? And I say, no. I said, I like to keep it on my lap. So I use it like a blanket over my lap to comfort me.
Mm-hmm.
And that just occurred to me too. Sorry, please continue.
No. It's amazing. And some people keep their handbags on their lap for that reason. It's the weight. Yeah, but
Yes.
it's also protecting the pelvis.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's actually really kind of fascinating when we dive into it.
I mean, seriously. And I think that's why, again, like when I talk with you, I mean, Jesus Christ, I hope you get something from these conversations, but whenever I talk to you, it feels like such a gift because it makes me, it makes me slow down and look at things. How do I say this? Because you would think about everything we're talking about that I would be looking with more like, I got to look for the trauma. I got to look for the sensitivities. I got to look. But in a lot of ways, I look with more wonder and awe. Like I just look at more wonder and awe about how fantastically weird and smart and bizarre and intelligent the body is, and the protective mechanisms and the desire to be free. Like when you think about, like, it's all part of the magic of what makes us us, right? Like, so, but there's just something about being able, I'm like, I will never look at a fucking hair salon the same again after talking to you.
Or the dentist, or a massage, or going to the supermarket.
My favorite part of the dentist when I have to go is when they put that heavy ass thing over me. Like, I'm like, I don't even need it because we're not doing x-rays, but can you just put that heavy vesty thing on me? Because immediately it's like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And it is. I have friends who say, when I go to the grocery store, I don't even know if they know why. And it's not for me to psychologically evaluate my friends, but they'll say, I get in, I have my list, and I just go as fast as I can. And I just get the stuff in the cart and I try to get out of there, and they put earbuds in and they're like, they try not to look at the lights, and they just like, they're like, and then it really fucks them up when the grocery store decides to move products and items.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we all just, I think that's one of the greatest things that's getting reinforced for me in this conversation, is to remember that almost nobody, because I've often said about myself, I'm like, I'll be in a room and I'm almost always having, and I'm not trying to sound or be special, but what I'm trying to say is I'm almost always having a different experience than everybody else. But I need to flip that and think everybody else is also having a different experience than me. So things that I might be like, oh, that's no big deal, that's really comfy for me, versus, oh, that terrifies me and it's really normal for you. Like if we just took into account each other's, call them differences or ways of managing or whatever it is, you know, it would require people to slow down and be more thoughtful, be more kind, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that was the thing at the hairdresser. It was like everything just happened so fast. Yeah, at least now with dentists, they're more trauma informed. So they'll tell you what's going to happen before it happens, so that when it happens, you already know that's what's going to happen. But at the hairdresser, there's like there isn't that sense of, okay, this is what's going to happen next, and then I'm gonna spin you around now, and then they spin me around, or I'm gonna get you to go over to the basin. It's over here. Do you want to follow me? Right? Like there are so many assumptions and expectations layered in there that you're supposed to know what happens next.
Yes.
Yeah. And it just happens so fast. But you know, it's that thing about how context, choice, and connection, as well as consistency and predictability, is what we need in order to begin to experience a relative sense of safety. And the longer that I've lived here in the US, the more I really get now why chain restaurants are so popular and chain stores are so popular. It's because we're actually more traumatized than what we think we are.
Oh my God, Linda, this is so brilliant, because we love to know we can go to different places and states, but find things that are familiar.
Yes. Yes.
You guys, if you're listening, Jesus, I hope you have, I hope you've been taking notes, because
and I want to say there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like if you're one of those people where, like when you're in another state and you want something that's familiar, right? Like I'm so glad that you have that available to you. And toxic capitalism capitalizes upon that.
Oh, come on. Of course. Of course. Everybody's making money off the fact that you're terrified, and they try to keep you scared. They try to keep you feeling, like you're not enough and you need to better yourself in some way. Even the self-help industry in some way. They need you to have quote unquote problems.
And they need to be able to offer familiarity and security and comfort.
So do you think, I know they do. This is a stupid question, but you know, there's psychologists on these teams that talk about marketing and all this, that talk about color and like all of it, right? Like all of it, like in how they're using, as you said, our trauma to try and predict our behavior and to almost steer us in very particular ways.
Yeah. And we love that familiarity.
Well, yes. And now you look at it and you just think, shit.
Yeah.
Again, nothing wrong with it. And shit.
Like, why not go to a restaurant you've never been to before and order something on the menu that you don't know if you'll like or not?
Oh, well, that's a big ask. And people are going to say, my hard-earned money? I don't want to waste it on something I don't like. I know for myself, I am a creature of habits. Like I love predictability. I get bored sometimes, but there are certain things that I like to know, like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Because then I can actually relax a little bit and enjoy a thing. But at the same time, you know, it's this idea of like, you know, everybody talks about like, get out of your comfort zone. I'm like, I do my best work in my comfort zone. Like I like to expand it gradually. That's a little bit more my sip. Like, I'm like, can we just expand it gradually? But here's the thing. I've often forced myself to do things that scare the shit out of me. And I used to think like, that's great. And I'm like, is it? I don't know. I think it's just something, it's that part of that internalized voice of suck it up. Let's go. Do the thing. Because I'm constantly, maybe a lot of other people are too. That's why I share a story and maybe it resonates for somebody. I kind of fluctuate or facilitate back and forth between, I just want the cozy blankets and all the fuzzy things and all the things that make me feel safe. And I don't want to be trapped by my own neuroses and fears and history and trauma. Like, so I got to do it like sip, sip. Right. And I like to do it with people who delighted me. And I like to do it with people who have my back and are cheering me on and who will still love me if I fuck it up. Like not bad things, but like when I'm clumsy. Right. And so I feel like I get a little braver every year. I feel like I grow a little bit more every year. But I'll just sometimes like I'm the one who would just be like, oh yeah, you know, they're sand sharks. They're not gonna bite me. I'll jump in. Like what? Right. And then I think, oh my God, why do you do that? And on some level, I don't know what, maybe just because I want to meet a shark really close, but another part of me is like, you just dysregulate yourself all the time. And I'm like, but I don't want to stay trapped in a little, like you call it what, that cotton batting, the wool batting.
Yes.
So,
we've got to challenge ourselves.
We do got to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
Every time I get on a stage, I'm challenging myself. Like sitting up here in my home in my comfies with like my animals and my sweetie downstairs. It's like people like, oh, using your voice on a podcast. I'm like, give me a mic. I can talk all day. As you know. I'm like, but put me on stage in front of a group of people. I love it. But my nervous system does not love it. But I love that connection and the chance to tell stories and be in the room and connect with people. But there's another part of me that's like, oh, we don't know the difference between excitement and fear, terror. But, you know, but I still make myself do it.
Yeah, like a moth to a flame. Yeah.
But there's all these things that have to be in place in order for me to do it. Which is like, I don't eat for 2 days before because my IBS, I'll just be in the bathroom constantly. So I just don't eat. Like there's all this protocol that has to happen in order for me to do that thing.
And so then you get to meet the edge of where excitement meets fear and is about to trip over into terror.
Yes.
Which is the feeling that you'd never want to experience ever again. But now you're in charge. So you're gaining a sense of mastery over the, you know, that excitement, fear, terror experience.
Yeah. So I like to dip my toe in, but it's also why I only do it a couple of times a year. Because it's a lot. Like it's a lot for me. But I love it. Like I love it. Like when I come off stage and I feel like, man. And then I get to connect with the people. Like I love it. And it's like terror. And then like, ooh. So I'm continuing to, like I just continue to do it. But there's a lot of things that I need for that safety in order for me to be that brave. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have any weirdo things like that in your life, but that's definitely one of mine.
When I first started teaching, it was meditation, and I sat, there were four folks in the room, and the lights were dim and my eyes were closed, because if I opened my eyes and I saw you looking at me while I was looking at you, I would be done. And that's where I started. Like that is where I started. Yeah. And so
Well,
slowly over time, I was able to like open one eye and then the other, and then have the lights up. Yeah. It's a
I mean,
practice.
teaching yoga was so incredible for me because I was able to like go from having a few people in the class to 10 to 15 to teaching at festivals to whatever. When it's my gig, right? Like my 3-day retreat, I don't stress about that at all. Like I'm like, put me in the room with the people. You know why, Linda? Because I'm in fucking charge. It's my time, my schedule. I can say bathroom break if I want one. I can. So
Yeah.
when I'm in like service to somebody else, I'll be like, oh, I don't want to screw up their event. Like, what if I have to go to the bathroom? Like all these things that go through my head. So I'm like, just don't eat for 2 days, like whatever. But there's something about, and again, you know what the thing is? One of my friends who's a healer who I work with, she's fascinating human being. Her name is Marianne C. And I remember not that long ago, like I'm talking in my 50s, saying to her, but if I still don't want to get in cars with people I don't know, because I can't control, like, what if I have to go to the bathroom? What if something happens, right? With IBS and stuff like that. I'm like, is that okay? And she said to me, why would taking care of yourself and what you need, like in a kind way? Like basically she was giving me permission. She's like, of course. And you realize like, why has that never occurred to me that it's okay for me to want what I want, need what I need, and to have what I have? You're shaking your head. Yes. Is there some
Yeah.
recognition there? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. It comes back to that missing experience.
It
And a
does.
result of not having someone there to support you in normalizing needs, we then develop a survival oriented relationship to our needs. So first survival is denial. I don't have needs. What are you talking about?
Exactly. I know.
And then
I can think of 3 people right now that are like raising their hand. Yes, go ahead.
and then as soon as I have a need and I can't not be in denial about it, then I go into fight or flight about it. Get out of my way. I've got to get this need met. And I act as if it's life or death when it might not actually be. But yeah, it's that survival oriented relationship to my needs. And then the flip side of that is that I hyper orient to the needs of other people, like as if it's life or death, or I'm in denial that other people have needs. Yeah. And
Yep.
yeah, so I do that thing. And then because it's actually painful to ask for what I need, I mistake love as someone that I don't need to communicate my needs to. They just get it.
Oh yeah, that's
Because
you're a mind reader and you should know what I need.
need, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I don't need to use my words because magically somehow through osmosis,
Yes.
as you've said, I love you. You should just know everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
And
see that a lot.
if you really loved me, I wouldn't
You
have
would,
to ask.
or wait, the other one. The other one is, and I see this all the time. Not to rag on us women, but there are times when I'll say to people who want in relationship and they'll be complaining, and I'll say, well, did you tell them that you like to get flowers or whatever their thing is? I'll just use flowers as an example. And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, well, what happened? And they'll be like, well, he brought him home. And I'll be like, well, or they brought him home or whatever. And I'll say, well, then what's the problem? Well, they only did that because I told them. And I was like, they can't win then. Like, there's no winning here. Do you see how this is a setup for failure?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, but in that moment, we make it about them. But sometimes I suspect it's about not being comfortable with receiving or having, like asking and then getting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. All right, the last thing, well, one of the last things I want to ask you is I've been staring at this list of 7 C's behind you on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And maybe it's 8 C's now. But I once read something on your website, I think, that was like the 7 C's of resilience, maybe. And I don't know if that's what those are, but what are those about? I'm fascinated now.
Oh, it's curious that you joined the dots between the two. Those C's are the 8 C's of IFS, that when you're in self energy. And the 7 C's that you're thinking about are the 7 C's of trauma-informed care and positive youth development, and building resilience in our youth.
I love that. You do so much great work. So I recognize I can't read them all, but I'm like, those look like Richard Schwartz, the
Yes.
internal family systems, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And can you just read them? Can you, I see curiosity.
Calm, confidence, clarity, creativity, courage, compassion, and connectedness.
Those are some great C's, Linda.
Yeah. But you know what I most love about the wall?
Tell me.
Is that you can buy this plastic stuff and you stick it on your wall and you can write on your wall. Like, that's what I love about it.
I mean, because how fun is that?
Yes.
I know people who have painted rooms for their children and they just give them permission to color all over it.
Yes. Yes.
And they're like, it's just paint. They're like, I can repaint it. They're only going to be this age for a certain time. Like, who gives a shit? And I think fascinating.
Yes. 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 But, you know, to come back to that bit about delight and joy and trouble, like kids who know that they're loved, they get into trouble.
Because they know it's safe.
It's
safe.
Yes.
So I can stretch that boundary. I can color outside the lines. I was a fucking kid, Linda. I dared not color. I did not color outside the lines in coloring books.
Yeah.
Like, do not cross that line.
Yeah. And so when kids get delighted in, they feel a sense of psychological safety. And so what oftentimes we do as women is we want these expressions of our beloveds taking delight in us, but really what we're looking for is psychological safety. And we're hoping that the flowers actually translate into psychological safety. Yeah, so we're going to the barber shop looking for a carton of milk.
Okay, wait. So would you mind sharing a little teaching moment, perhaps, of what's maybe a better way to ask or to find or discover that psychological safety, whether it's within yourself, or how can you help yourself, or how can you maybe guide a partner to support you in that?
Yeah, I learned about this through my work with internal family systems through IFS. So with working with numerous women who are raised in abusive or neglectful homes, and they'd often come to therapy saying, my partner doesn't do this or that for me, right? Or I had this running thing where on my birthday, blah, blah, blah. So we connect to the part, and the part always goes back to dad and wanting dad to make me feel special. Yeah. And then what was that about? You know, what function did that serve? And the child is always saying, oh, if dad makes me feel special, then it means that he's not gonna be abusive or angry or yell in this moment. Yeah, that the child self operates in binary. So to recognize what it is that we're actually looking, the need that we're looking to get met by being made to feel special. Because, and that is why being made to feel special can be a bottomless pit.
Oh my God, a never ending
cycle. And it can be so exhausting for yourself and confusing for yourself as well as for the partner, because they can actually do it right and do it all the time. And yet
it won't matter.
The itch doesn't get scratched. Yeah, because the need that's underneath isn't getting recognized by yourself and then with your partner.
So do you think that the self is saying, is the self aware that it wants to be quote unquote special? Or is it just kind of focusing on what isn't or isn't happening in the relationship?
The self is holding space for the wounds of my inner child so that I can get connected to why it is I'm deeply yearning for something from my partner. What is the need that I'm looking to get met? Yeah, and the need might be to be made to feel special. And it's like, no, it's something more basic.
Right?
Under the under. Yeah. Yeah. And I've just found it so surprising over time that it's that need to feel safe.
I mean, I just feel like if there was a magic pill where people could magically feel safe, the world would be such a different place.
Yeah. and it's psychologically safe.
Yes.
Yeah. And being delighted in is an expression of that.
I
And
agree.
yeah, yeah.
You know, when
So,
you, sorry, go ahead.
oh, that's why we need to surround ourselves with people who delight in us, but to and to simultaneously recognize that as a psychological safety need, to actually let it land at that level.
Well, I will say this. I'm feeling, I'm getting emotional again because we lost in the past 2 years, we've lost like 4 of our furry kids. And one of my beloved pups, Bucky Biscuits, he was such a mama's boy. And when I would walk in the room, it was like, I should have an Academy Award just because I entered the room. He would like spin and like, oh my God, right? So now we have 2 senior dogs who are so bonded to each other. They were rescues. They're biological brothers, so they're really bonded. They're 13. So you come in the room, they're happy, but you know. And then our cat, Toby Pajamas, who's 15. But we have this new puppy. And like today, my sweetie sent me a picture of him. And he was just sitting, a little pug puppy. He's the cutest little thing. And he's sitting and he's looking out the window. And my sweetie just writes to me, he's waiting for his mom. He's waiting for his mom to come home. And I was like happy tears. I was just like, oh my God. And then whenever I come home or step into a room, I mean, the delight in seeing me, and it is a bomb for my soul, and I will never get tired of it. I will never take it for granted. And so I really do try to practice. I do not always get it right. But I really do try to practice with the people I love that I show that delight when they walk in a room, because to be taken in that way. And you know, when you just walk in a room and somebody's like, oh, like you're here, and you just go like like immediately I just start to cry. And when you realize like it's touching, it is touch. I mean, it's fun, of course. The ego gets a little, oh yeah, it's great, but it is a sense of deep psychological safety.
To be
And
wanted.
to be
To be
wanted.
wanted. Right. And as children,
Yeah.
we know that that's our birthright. And when it's not given to us by our family, we surrogate and we substitute with being needed. Like,
People pleasing. Yeah, people pleasing.
People pleasing. Yeah, let me, you know, and it fulfills approval needs. I get attention for it. I get rewarded for it.
Yeah, I'm good.
I get patted on the head, like, you know, and I also get that I need, like, my parents need me because our family is stressed and, you know, we were refugees in a new country. Like, my parents needed me to interpret for them, to translate for them, as well as to take care of my little sister. And so, but that becomes a setup for codependence as well as for anti-dependence and stoic self-reliance. And we know that anti-dependence is the other side of the same coin as codependence, right? Anti-dependence is an expression of codependence.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
okay, you said stoic self-dependence. We need to circle back to that. It's fantastic. Go ahead.
Yes. And so I then go through the world trying to find ways in which people will need me.
Oh, yeah. I know. Yeah.
So I can get the feeling of feeling wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it becomes a setup. Because there's a very fine line between being wanted, being needed, and then being exploited.
Yes, for sure.
Being taken advantage of.
For sure.
Compassion fatigue, work and burnout. Yeah.
And that sense of martyrdom where then you have rage, resentment.
Yes.
Because you know you're doing it, but you almost like can't stop it because it's so habituated. And then you would never dare say, I feel taken advantage of. And then it just churns and burns like internally.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm no stranger to I'm just laughing, listening, thinking, no, I'm laughing at myself, not anybody else, but just thinking like, oh, don't I know that yellow brick road? I have walked down that road with Dorothy and Toad. Like I've been there. And really questioning one of the things that I had to do to kind of stop that pattern is to really question my motive and my intention of why I'm about to say yes to this thing or do this thing or show up with the amount of energy. Like, I'm like, why am I doing this? And my sweetie's an only child, so he's a really different beast than me. He's a really different, thing than me. And so I often marvel at like his sense of self. I mean, he had insecurities maybe in different ways, but I don't know. It's like, it's just fascinating when you grow up with siblings and stuff too, like all the dynamics that come with that. Like, I didn't even know you had a little sister. So that's another layer for another time. That's fascinating. But so it's just interesting to like, I feel like I'm playing like, Connect Four, that game when you drop the piece in, like whenever I talk to you, I'm like, holy shit, Linda. I just dropped another one in, another one in the row there. So yeah, it's fantastic. And I know so many people are resonating with what you just said right now. And there are so many people, not just in the arts of like nurses and emergency care workers and people who give and mothers and 1,000 other things, but just people in general who have that kind of, I need to earn the love. Like I need to earn the wanting. I need to do something about, like I'm not just enough because I'm here, right? Like my worth and all of that, my deserving, all of that, my enoughness, it needs to be earned. Because somebody didn't tell you when you were little, like, no, man, you're like fantastic. Just as you, like Mr. Rogers. Could we please just do Mr. Rogers reruns? Because Mr. Rogers, I mean, he's like, I have a candle of him over there, and it's like Saint Mr. Rogers, because he's helped so many little kids.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been the only time all week a kid heard, I like you just the way you are.
Yeah.
But like you do that for adults, Linda.
Yeah.
You do. Yeah. You help so many of us. And I assume you work with children sometimes.
I work with children in adult bodies.
Yeah, me. And P.S. I'm one of them. P.S. I'm one of them. But yes, that's what I say too. Yeah, it's beautiful. Linda, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your life to spend some time with me and my listeners, and for just bringing all of yourself, and for creating safe space to have all kinds of conversations, to let me ask questions, to be curious, to learn, to grow. I delight in you and appreciate you so much. And you are a gift. You are a gift to so many of us. And I'm so, there are times when it's like, I don't know if it's appropriate to say this to you, but when people will say to me, like, I'm so sorry your mother was killed and this happened and that happened. And I just think, sure, it was awful. There's a lot there, but like, I wouldn't be who I am today without that whole kaleidoscope of experiences. And there's a part of me that thinks like, and again, I hope you receive this the way my heart means it. I'm grateful that you've had some of the experiences you've had so that you could be who you are, because just by you being who you are now, the world is better for it. Not that maybe you wouldn't have grown into this person and this wisdom with different or without those things. But you being this line that I love so much, I have to read it. When you say, I am the child of merchants and traders and people who tended to the land and received her abundance. I am the daughter of fragrant rice. And all the things that happened, your family fleeing your homeland, all of it, the historical trauma, all of it has crafted and created and shape-shifted you into something that I have no doubt all of your ancestors are so proud of.
Thank you, Karen. It's going to just take a pause to let that land. you know, it's a real gift to, it is a real gift to be with people these days. Yeah, and there are those of us who didn't survive, right, who are still finding our way. Yeah. And to live through experiences that you wouldn't want to wish upon anyone else.
Yes.
And to grow through them and beyond them actually takes a lot of good luck as well as resources and privilege.
Yeah.
And advantages. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no guilt whatsoever. Right? If you happen to be one of those people who actually makes it onto the other side. And I think that's the thing that so many of us struggle with.
Yes.
Yeah, is that survivor guilt. Because we know the people who got left behind or are still left behind or haven't made it.
In a lot of different ways, like literally,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and psychologically, physically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when people ask me, how did you do it? I say it's just a lot of really dumb luck, as well as grit, as well as grace. And it's so humbling. And so I'm so humbled to be here with you, Karen. Like, so humbled. Because really, the joy that you bring into this world, simply as you are, and the gift of your sharing from your heart, and the invitational space to engage in struggle together, to engage in creative tension together that doesn't trip over into conflict, but stays in that creative tension place. Yeah, it's so rare. Yeah, you're special.
Huh. Thank you.
And I like you just as you are.
Oh, Linda, you're gonna ruin me. That's so sweet. That's so sweet. And thank you for you know, I have so much enthusiasm for the work that I do and the ways that I serve, and I'm really aware of how far I've come and how far I have to go. And so I appreciate when you allow me to have conversations about race and colonization and different points of view and things that I'm, you know, still in my own ways, maybe clumsy, but with sincerity in my heart, wanting to always be better and to learn. And so that creative tension that you talk about, you allow me to, and I think it's because like what you just said now means so much to me, because I think you feel for lack of a better word, the intention of my heart, that I want to I wish I could make the world better for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you help so many of us to do that. I always cry when I talk to you, Linda, in such a good way. Oh, I laugh so much and I cry so much. So just thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you.
And do you have any events or any work or anything you're wicked excited about or want to share with people? I always will share how people can reach you and stuff, but is there any trainings or things you have going on, or any question I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
You can find out more about what I'm up to on my website. So www.linda-ty.com. I send out a monthly newsletter. It's, you know, there's lots of fun stuff in there.
There is. I get it. I got one today, actually. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Casey, if you're listening.
And I think next time I come back, if you'll have me back, I think it would be nice to talk about grief, like
I would
complex,
love.
ambiguous grief, because it's the healing balm is to grieve. And yet, because grief needs witnessing, and yet trauma says exposure equals death.
Mhm.
And then we're raised in families and within systems and societies that say, suck it up, stuff it down, numb it out, forget about it, move on with your life. Let me heroically save you from your feelings. Or we can just substitute and replace and move on. And so we don't get to grieve. We don't get to learn how to. It becomes shamed and stigmatized. We then feel shame over our losses. Right. Yeah.
And what's acceptable to consider a loss?
Yes.
Even like, people, we have these rules about it's just a dog, get over it, or why are you crying about that, or it's been 3 months, or like all the weird rules that society tries to tell us about what we're allowed to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
But I have you back. Are you kidding me? Next week, let's go. I will have you back whenever the time feels spacious and right and easy for you. And I would love to talk about grief. And in fact, I sent some of your stuff to there's a beautiful writer. He's a writer, he's a dad, he's a chaplain, he's a martial artist, he's fascinating. His name is J.S. Pak. I don't know if you're aware of his work. His given name is June. And I had June on a couple of months ago, and we talked a lot about grief. And I think you would love his work. And I said to him, I think you would love my friend Linda. So I have sent him stuff of yours and quotes and things that you've posted and trainings that you're having. And so I would love to talk about grief, because I think it is something that is really misunderstood, does not have a big playground to run around on. I don't think people like to talk about it in our culture. And who better to talk about it with than you? So open invitation. I'll bug you in 6 months or whatever and be like, want to come back and play? But that's what we'll dive into. And I can't wait, because I know it's not just necessary, it's important, but it's really needed.
Yeah. Because we can't do trauma without doing grief.
Okay, say that one more time.
We can't do trauma without doing grief. Yeah.
You know what's interesting? And I know we got to let each other go, but I find that nowadays it's almost easier or more comfortable for people to say I have trauma than to say I have grief.
Yeah.
All right, you've heard it first here, guys. We're coming back next time. You'll get to delight in another visit from my beautiful friend. And Linda, if you ever come to the East Coast, please do tell me, because I would just love to, I would just love to be able to, even if I just give you a hug and say hi before you walk into your conference room, it would be worth the trip to Boston or wherever you're going to be. I'm a little jealous. I'm a little jealous of those West Coasters getting this incredible experience. I hope you do a post about it. I know it's probably like, it's all can't talk about it, but like just even that process is fascinating. And I don't think a ton of people know about it. Like in your world, they might. No, because it's cutting edge, because it's Linda Ty bringing her own special energy and stuff to it. All right. So Linda, I love you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, KK. It's been such a pleasure. I love you too.
And will you please give Buttons a big scoochie scritchies for me? Lots of kisses. Okay, you guys, thank you for tuning in. As I always say at the end, I appreciate your time. You could be anywhere right now. And if you're still hearing the sound of my voice and you hung in here for like 2 hours, that is no small thing. So we appreciate your time, your attention, your caring, your presence, your being here. And wherever you go, may you leave yourself and the people and the animals and the place and the land and the environment better than how you found it. May it be better off for you having been there. Wherever you go, may you be your own kind of blessing. Bye.
guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.